The tragedy of the commons. Imagine a green pasture, open to all. Every herder may bring animals to graze. The grass grows back, but only so fast. Each herder thinks, if I add one more cow, I gain. The cost, spread among all, is barely felt. So each adds more. Soon the pasture is barren. This is the tragedy of the commons. It is not just a story about grass. It is about overfishing, pollution, traffic, noise. Any shared resource faces this danger. The incentives are misaligned. Each player benefits from using more, but the cost is shared. Game theory explains this trap. It is a game where mutual restraint would help all, yet individual gain tempts each to defect. The result? Collapse. We see this in real life. Climate change, ocean acidification, deforestation, antibiotic resistance. Every player knows the danger, but action feels futile unless others act too. This is a prisoner's dilemma on a global scale. If everyone cooperates, all benefit. If one defects while others cooperate, the defector wins most. But if all defect, all lose. Why don't we act together? Because we fear betrayal. The tragedy is not just about greed, it is about trust, or the lack of it. And yet, some communities avoid collapse. How? Through norms, through punishment, through repeated interaction. If I know we'll play this game again tomorrow, I may restrain myself today. If I defect now, I may be punished later. If I care about my reputation, I think twice. Repeated games change the incentives. Now, cooperation can emerge, not out of selflessness, but strategy. Tit for tat is one such strategy. It starts with cooperation, then mirrors your last move. If you cooperate, I do too. If you defect, I retaliate. It is forgiving, but firm. Over time, it punishes defectors and rewards cooperation. In the real world, we mimic this. We boycott polluters. We reward green behavior. We remember. Memory becomes a weapon. But memory is not enough. Institutions matter. Laws, regulations, agreements. They structure the game. They change the payoffs. A carbon tax, a quota, a permit system. All these reshape the dilemma. They turn a destructive game into a sustainable one, but only if enforced. Enforcement is hard. It requires watchers, judges, consequences, and it requires fairness. If only some follow the rules, others stop trying. So fairness becomes vital, not just in law, but in perception. If people feel cheated, they stop cooperating. This is the second tragedy, not just the commons, but the collapse of trust. To preserve a shared resource, we must preserve shared belief. Game theory does not promise easy answers, but it warns us. Unchecked incentives lead to ruin. If we reward short-term gain and ignore long-term loss, collapse is not a mistake. It is the logical end. So, how do we avoid it? We remember that we are not alone. Each choice ripples outward. Each defection invites more. But each act of restraint can inspire. Cooperation is fragile, but so is destruction. In that fragility, we choose. We choose whether the pasture lives or dies. But the game can be rewritten. Change the rules. Change the frame. What if, instead of grazing as individuals, we act as one? What if herders vote on limits, share the burden, punish cheaters, reward protectors. Now, the game shifts. Now, the logic supports restraint. The commons does not need to be tragic. It can be cooperative, but only if the players see themselves as a group, not as rivals. Identity changes incentives. When I becomes we, the outcome shifts. This is the deeper lesson. That game theory is not fate. It is a mirror of assumptions. If we assume selfishness, we get collapse. If we assume coordination, we can rise. And the world is full of both. The challenge is not in logic, it is in belief. Can we believe that others will act for the good? Can we create systems that reward the long view? Can we make patience profitable? That is the true game, and it is not over yet. Think of traffic congestion. Each driver chooses a route. If too many choose the same, it slows. Still, the fastest path for one might worsen it for all. This is the brace paradox. Removing a road may actually improve flow. Why? Because each driver, optimizing for self, can cause systemic failure. We call this selfish routing. Game theory shows that in large systems, individual rationality can be collective madness. So what works? Sometimes randomization, sometimes tolls, sometimes communication. In networks, in cities, in nature, these dynamics unfold. A forest survives, not because each tree acts alone, but because the system balances. Mycorrhizal networks share resources. Warning signals travel underground. What looks selfish may hide cooperation. Biology reveals evolved strategies. Game theory models them. Reciprocal altruism, kin selection, group selection, all variants of a deeper logic. Survival favors cooperation when the structure rewards it. But structure must be built. Markets don't always do it. Governments often try. Customs too. But breakdowns happen. See fisheries collapsing from unregulated catch. See the ozone hole before treaties. See silent springs and plastic seas. These are not failures of knowledge. They are failures of incentive alignment. Fix the incentives. Fix the game. That's the hard part. Because power intervenes. If some benefit more from the old game, they resist new rules. They fund doubt, delay action, cast cooperation as weakness. This is strategic behavior, rational under the wrong game. So it becomes a meta game. Not just playing, but choosing what game to play. Meta strategy. Institutions are meta strategies made durable. They codify cooperation. But institutions decay. Corruption, capture, apathy, they unwrite the rules. Then the old tragedy returns. Avoiding it requires vigilance, teaching the game, remembering the stakes. The pasture is not just a metaphor. It is the air we breathe, the water we drink, the world we share. To save it, we must model not just minds, but systems. And we must act, not just think, or else the grass will vanish beneath our feet forever. Zero sum versus non-zero sum. In a quiet room, two people sit across from each other with only one rule. Whatever one gains, the other must lose. There is no compromise, no overlap. One's joy is the other's sorrow. One's success, the other's failure. This is the nature of a zero-sum game. Imagine a pie. If one player takes a larger slice, the other gets less. No matter how you cut it, the total never changes. The sum of gains and losses is always zero. It's not just a game, it's a perspective, a lens through which the world is often seen. In sports, it's obvious. One team wins, the other loses. In chess, one player's checkmate is the other's defeat. Politics often feels the same. Power appears limited. If you rise, I fall. If I rise, you vanish. The world becomes a battlefield where every inch gained must be taken from someone else. But not all games are zero sum. Some allow both players to win or lose together. These are non zero sum games. They offer the possibility of shared benefit or mutual ruin. In business, two companies might compete, but also innovate, creating a larger market for both. In marriage, in friendship, in diplomacy, outcomes can rise together. Trust builds value, cooperation multiplies rewards. But here's the paradox. Most people think they're in a zero sum game, even when they're not. It's safer that way. If the world is a competition, then the rules are clear. Win or lose, take or be taken from. But this mindset shrinks possibilities. It blinds us to mutual growth. It teaches us to protect rather than to connect. Game theory invites us to question that lens. It asks, is there more to gain by sharing, by trusting, by risking together? Consider prisoners again. If both stay silent, both win. But if one defects, the other loses badly. The worst outcome comes when one sees the game as zero sum, while the other sees it as cooperative. This is the real danger. Not the game itself, but the belief about it. If I think you'll betray me, I might strike first, even if you never intended to hurt me. My fear creates the very future I wanted to avoid. Now, imagine a world where most games are non-zero sum, where nations don't rise by conquering, but by collaborating, where knowledge grows as it's shared, where health, peace, and wealth can expand for all. This is not fantasy. It's already happening. Global trade, the internet, scientific discovery, none are zero sum. We all benefit, but only if we choose to see it. The decision lies not in the game, but in the framing, in whether we believe the pie can grow. That value can be created, not just redistributed. And that belief, simple as it is, can shape how we act. The person across from you is not always your rival. Sometimes they are your mirror. Sometimes your partner. Ask yourself, when conflict rises, are we fighting for the same thing? Could we both win? Could we both lose? The answer isn't always yes, but it's not always no either. The world is not built only on battles, it is built on bonds. And every bond begins with the decision to play a different kind of game, not one of domination, but of creation, not one of fear, but of trust, not zero, something more, something human, something possible, something better. The battle of the sexes, coordination without agreement. Two lovers stand beneath a gray sky. They wish to spend the evening together, but they don't agree on where to go. One wants the opera, the other wants the football match. Each would rather be with the other than be alone, but neither wants to spend the night in a place they hate, and neither knows what the other will choose. And so, they stand at a crossroads, not of streets, but of strategy. This is the battle of the sexes, not a conflict of power, but a conflict of preference. Two people, two choices. Both want to coordinate, but each wants the coordination to happen their way. The beauty of the dilemma lies in its asymmetry. Unlike the prisoner's dilemma, where betrayal dominates cooperation, the battle of the sexes rewards alignment. If they choose the same event, both benefit, but one benefits more, the one whose preference is followed. So they each must choose, without talking, without signals, where to go. If they both choose opera, one is delighted and the other content. If they both choose football, the roles reverse. If they choose differently, they are alone. Neither gets what they want, not even each other. What does game theory teach us here? That cooperation is not always about sacrifice. Sometimes it's about timing, assumptions, guesswork. You may wish to meet someone halfway, but the road you think is halfway may be the road they avoid. Here, there is no dominant strategy. You must think not only about what you want, but about what they think you want, and what you think they think you want. It is a hall of mirrors. Each level of thought pulls the strategy in a different direction. Perhaps she thinks he will go to the opera because he knows she prefers it. So she chooses the opera too. But what if he thinks she will avoid the opera, not wanting to be selfish? Then he chooses football, and they miss. The more rational the reasoning becomes, the more tangled the result. And so, even love becomes a game, not of deception, but of coordination. This is not limited to lovers. It appears in markets, in politics, in daily life. Imagine two companies launching products. They want to avoid launching on the same day, but they want visibility. If they both launch together, they split the audience. If they avoid each other, one gains, one loses. Or worse, they cancel each other out. Or think of diplomacy. Two nations must coordinate on a treaty. One wants Clause A, the other wants Clause B. Both prefer agreement over deadlock, but each prefers their clause. The result? Delay, paralysis. Even two drivers approaching a narrow bridge face the same game. If both drive forward, they crash. If one waits and the other drives, they both cross. But if both wait, nothing moves. How do humans solve this? Sometimes through convention, culture, rituals. In the lover's dilemma, maybe it's always known that on Fridays he chooses, on Saturdays she does. A rhythm, a signal. Sometimes through hierarchy. The more dominant player leads, the other yields. Sometimes through randomness, tossing a coin, and sometimes through repeated play. In an ongoing relationship, they might alternate. Opera this week, football next. This transforms the game from a one-shot puzzle into a sequence. Memory enters, fairness emerges. Game theory does not demand cold logic. It invites understanding, empathy, anticipation. To solve the battle of the sexes, one must model the other's desires as carefully as their own. You cannot dominate your way to unity. You must synchronize. And yet, there is always a cost. Someone must bend. And in that bending, a story unfolds. Who yields? Who leads? How often? And why? The answers shape relationships, institutions, even societies. What seems like a simple choice, opera or football, becomes a symbolic struggle between autonomy and connection. freedom and compromise, voice and silence. And so, every time two minds attempt to move as one, they reenact this dance, a battle not of dominance, but of coordination, where both want to be together, but differ on how. And in that small fracture, the game lives. The prisoner's dilemma, the foundation of strategic thinking. Imagine a quiet room. Two people sit in separate cells. They were once allies, maybe even friends. Now they are alone, unsure of what the other is thinking. Somewhere behind closed doors, a decision is waiting. A deal has been offered by the authorities. A simple deal, yet devastating in its implications. If one testifies against the other, while the other remains silent, the one who betrays walks free. The other, the loyal one, receives the full sentence. But if both betray, they both receive moderate punishment. And if both stay silent, if they both trust, then each only receives a minor sentence. This is the prisoner's dilemma, a scenario so simple that it feels almost like a riddle. But hidden within this structure is one of the most powerful insights in the field of game theory, a model that explains how rational individuals can end up making decisions that lead to irrational outcomes for all. Each prisoner has a clear incentive to betray. It's safer. No matter what the other does, betrayal leads to a better personal outcome. And yet, if both think this way, they each betray and both suffer. Cooperation would have led to a lighter result. But cooperation is fragile. It requires trust. It demands risk. This paradox sits at the heart of strategy, not just in prisons or courtrooms, but in businesses, in relationships, in nations, in life. The tension between doing what's best for oneself and doing what's best for the collective shapes every corner of human behavior. In the one-shot version of the game, betrayal dominates. But what happens when the game is repeated? What if these prisoners meet again? What if their decisions carry consequences, not just once, but many times into the future? This is the iterated prisoner's dilemma. And here, a new world emerges. When people interact repeatedly, they begin to learn. They remember past behavior. They develop expectations. They form grudges. They forgive. They retaliate. They reward. In this long-term game, betrayal carries costs beyond the immediate gain. A single act of treachery might bring temporary victory, but it can poison the well of future cooperation. Strategies evolve. One of the simplest and surprisingly effective is tit for tat. It begins with cooperation. On the next round, it simply mirrors what the opponent did. If they cooperated, it cooperates. If they betrayed, it punishes with betrayal. Tit for tat is generous, but not naive. It retaliates, but doesn't hold grudges. It's a kind of strategic empathy. Over many iterations, strategies like this often outperform purely selfish ones, because in a repeated world, reputation matters, memory matters. The shadow of the future alters the logic of the present. In nature, we see this dynamic everywhere. Vampire bats, for example, share blood with others who've shared with them in the past. Dolphins form alliances, supporting each other in battles for mates. Even bacteria evolve mechanisms that reward cooperation and punish freeloaders. Game theory provides a language for these interactions, a mathematical way to capture the invisible negotiations of life, a quiet algorithm running beneath the surface of everything, from economics to biology to diplomacy. And yet, The lessons of the prisoner's dilemma reach beyond equations. It teaches us about vulnerability. To cooperate is to expose oneself to harm, to extend a hand, unsure if it will be shaken or slapped away. It's not irrational to protect oneself, but sometimes true strength lies in the willingness to trust. It also teaches us about systems. In a society where betrayal is punished and cooperation is rewarded, different behaviors emerge. Laws, norms, and institutions are like the rules of the repeated game. They create structure, allowing trust to flourish. But if the environment changes, if memory is erased, or players are shuffled randomly, then trust evaporates, cooperation collapses. What remains is suspicion and self preservation. There's a fragile balance between strategy and compassion, between logic and intuition. The prisoner's dilemma asks, what kind of world do you want to create? If everyone acts purely for themselves, we all lose. If we dare to work together, even at a risk, we might all gain. The difference lies in understanding that your choices don't just affect you, they ripple outward, shaping the very landscape of possibility. And so, game theory becomes not just a tool for economists and scientists, but a philosophy, a way of seeing human behavior not as isolated acts, but as interconnected moves on a vast, invisible board. Every glance, every gesture, every decision to give or withhold, to forgive or to retaliate. These are moves in a game we're all playing, whether we realize it or not. And the question is always the same. Do you choose to trust? Over time, systems emerge that try to answer this question for us. Political systems, legal systems, cultural norms, religious teachings, they all wrestle with the same fundamental dilemma. How can we encourage cooperation in a world filled with incentives to betray? Some systems rely on punishment, others on reward, some on transparency, others on faith. But beneath it all, the logic remains the same. When betrayal is easy, trust dies. When cooperation is nurtured, even fragile alliances can bloom into lasting peace. The prisoner's dilemma also invites us to reflect inwardly. What kind of player are you? Do you always protect yourself first? Do you give others the benefit of the doubt? Do you punish harshly or forgive easily? These aren't just strategic questions. They're ethical ones, personal ones, because the game isn't just played by corporations or nations. It's played every day, between friends, between siblings, between strangers passing on a street. You hold in your hands the power to shift the game, not with grand gestures, but with small decisions, a moment of generosity, a pause before retaliation, a willingness to see the other not as an opponent, but as a potential ally. There's a quiet elegance in the way game theory reveals the patterns beneath behavior, a reminder that our instincts, while powerful, are not always optimal, that what feels safe in the short term can be costly in the long term, and that true intelligence often lies not in winning the next move, but in shaping the future game. As you rest now, let the lesson of the prisoner's dilemma settle in. It's not a warning, it's a whisper of potential. That trust, once earned, can change everything. That strategy is not just about power, but about understanding, and that sometimes the smartest move is the one that seems the most vulnerable. To cooperate, to forgive, to believe that the next move might be different. To imagine a world where we all choose to stay silent together. The logic of looking backward. Picture a grand chessboard, every square known, every piece visible, no secrets, no dice, no luck, only logic. This is perfect information. In such a world, the only uncertainty is what your opponent will choose, not what is possible. Now, imagine a game played in turns. You move, I move, we alternate, always seeing the full board. How do you win? How do you decide what to do now? You start from the end. This is backward induction. It is the quiet art of looking forward by thinking backward. To know what to do in the present, you assume the future is already written and trace your way back to now. In a simple game, this feels natural. Imagine this, a pile of 10 coins. Players take turns removing one or two. Whoever takes the last coin wins. If you're second to last, you must force your opponent into losing. So you think, what number should I leave them with? You work backwards. 10, 9, 8, 7, until you see a pattern. Certain numbers are traps. Others are power. Every move becomes a branch. Every branch leads somewhere. Some end in victory, some in loss. Backward induction prunes the tree of choices until only the rational path remains. But humans are not always rational. We hope. We bluff. We guess. Still, in certain games, logic beats intuition. Take the centipede game. Two players can either take the pot or pass it forward. With each pass, the pot grows, but the risk grows too. At the end, whoever takes last gets the biggest reward. But backward induction says, take at the first chance. Why? Because at the last move, your opponent would take. So the second to last player expects this and takes earlier, and so on until the first. It's logical, and yet it feels wrong. Why not cooperate and let the pot grow? Because logic assumes mistrust. This is the trap of backward induction. It's cold, pure, but not always human. It ignores emotion, reputation, hope. It assumes players are machines, not people. And sometimes people break logic on purpose. But in perfect information games, backward induction can be powerful. It teaches patience, precision, foresight. It appears in negotiation. If I accept this deal now, what will they expect later? It guides parenting. If I give in now, what pattern do I teach? It appears in war. If I don't retaliate now, will I be seen as weak later? Every present choice echoes through future moves. This is not fear. It is structure. When players share full knowledge of the rules and choices, strategy becomes visible. Backward induction teaches restraint. It says, don't act for now, act for the end. If I know how you would act tomorrow, I can guess what I must do today. The puzzle deepens. If I know you will think this way, maybe I must act now to prevent that future. But then you know I know. So your future changes. And now my present must change too. It becomes a spiral of logic, a game of recursive minds. But in this spiral, something stabilizes. The rational course begins to shine through. Not the loudest, not the most obvious, but the one path that survives every layer of prediction. That is the logic backward induction reveals. And even if life is not chess, even if the board is clouded and the pieces are unclear, we still play with glimpses of this logic, we still ask, if this goes on, where will I end? And if that end is bad, what must I change now? This way of thinking is not cold. It is protective. It saves you from regret. It draws maps inside chaos. It says, the end matters, and the end starts here. Nash equilibrium, the frozen logic of mutual expectations. Somewhere in the silent corners of decision, two minds reach a state of stillness. Neither wants to move, not because they are at peace, but because any motion would make things worse for both of them. This is the Nash equilibrium. Named after mathematician John Nash, it is a moment in time, a quiet plateau in the space of strategy, where no player has anything to gain by changing their decision unilaterally. Everyone plays their best move, assuming others will do the same. No one wins more by shifting alone. No one wants to shift first. And so they wait, staring, calculating, settling. Imagine two drivers speeding toward an intersection with no traffic lights. Each has a choice, stop or go. If both go, they crash. If both stop, they wait. If one goes and the other stops, the one who moves wins a little time. But if you think the other will go, you're safer to stop. And if you think they'll stop, you might go. The equilibrium is delicate, hesitant, conditional. Nash's idea gave structure to this tension. He showed that in every game, there exists at least one point where all players have chosen a strategy that gives them no reason to deviate. Even if it's not the best possible outcome overall, it's just stable, not ideal, just unmovable. Think of two companies setting prices. If one lowers its price, the other loses customers. So the other lowers its price too. Then the first lowers it again. A price war begins. But eventually, they reach a point where lowering the price further hurts both. Raising it would cost them customers. So they settle at a number, not because it's good, but because deviation would be worse. A truce in disguise, a fragile, logical silence. Or think of relationships. A couple may fall into a rhythm, a routine that neither loves but neither leaves. Changing requires risk. Speaking up might bring conflict, so they remain strategically quiet, not happy, but stable. No incentive to move, no gain in motion. A Nash equilibrium of emotion. This equilibrium is not always fair, nor kind. It is simply real. It emerges not from compassion, but from prediction, from the ability to look into the mind of the other and say, if I move, they'll move too, and that will make things worse. So you don't. This concept becomes powerful when applied to systems, to nations in conflict, to companies in competition, to alliances held together not by trust, but by mutual threat. During the Cold War, nuclear deterrence was a chilling Nash equilibrium. Neither side wanted war, but neither could disarm. If one disarmed and the other didn't, they'd be vulnerable. So both remained armed, permanently, not out of aggression, but out of logic. In game theory, this is known as a non-cooperative game. Everyone acts alone. No binding agreements, no shared loyalty, just prediction, just calculation. And yet, through this cold math, peace was preserved. For a time, the Nash equilibrium doesn't always feel like a solution. Sometimes it feels like a trap, a mirror that reflects your strategy back at you. Every time you try to escape, it responds. And so you pause, not because you're free, but because you're trapped in expectation. In some games, the Nash point is beautiful. Think of a dance where each partner moves in perfect sync. No need to adjust. Each step complements the other. A graceful symmetry of choices. No one deviates because harmony has already been found. The equilibrium is natural, effortless, almost unconscious. But in other games, it's a prison, a place where every choice is defensive, where each strategy is designed not to win, but not to lose. A stale quiet, a resignation, and yet, understanding this point changes everything. Because once you recognize it, you can ask a different question. Not just, what will others do? But what if we moved together? What if the rules changed? In some versions of the prisoner's dilemma, both players reach a Nash equilibrium by betraying. It's stable, but worse for both. But if they could make a binding agreement to cooperate, they'd both benefit. Nash equilibrium is stable under isolation. But when communication enters, when trust or enforcement is possible, new worlds of strategy open up. So we build institutions, contracts, laws, alliances, systems to push players away from equilibrium when it's harmful and toward it when it's kind. In coordination games, equilibrium often reflects social conventions. Why do we drive on the right side of the road or the left? It doesn't matter which side, as long as everyone agrees. Once the convention is set, it becomes irrational to deviate. That's a Nash equilibrium, too. A shared understanding, frozen into habit. Fashion, language, etiquette, all emerge as strategic equilibria. You wear certain clothes not because they're better, but because deviation would isolate you. You speak a language not because it's superior, but because others understand it. Strategy wrapped in culture. The concept stretches further still. In ecosystems, species co-evolve into equilibria. Predators and prey balance each other. Flowers evolve to attract specific pollinators. Trees in a forest compete for sunlight, their branches growing not just upward, but outward in silent competition. No single organism can change its strategy alone without suffering. So they evolve together, locked into mutual response. This is the beauty and tragedy of the Nash equilibrium. It explains why systems settle, why patterns repeat, why progress is hard, but also why stability exists at all. Without it, chaos. With it, order. Not perfect order, but predictable. Predictability is a kind of peace, a dull, gray peace, but peace nonetheless. And sometimes, just knowing that the system is stuck is the first step in unlocking it. Because game theory isn't just about describing the game, it's about designing better ones. If the Nash equilibrium leads to suboptimal outcomes, maybe the structure needs to change. Maybe incentives must be realigned. Maybe players need tools to coordinate. Maybe fear must be replaced with trust. Sometimes you must redesign the game itself. And so, while the Nash equilibrium shows us how people behave when they act alone, it also whispers something deeper. Isolation is not always rational. Connection changes the rules. When you know that the other player sees what you see, when you both understand the trap, when you both long to escape, then maybe, together, you can. Maybe you can shift, not alone, but in unison. Break the symmetry, shatter the stale logic, build a new equilibrium, one not built on fear, but on choice, on change, on hope.